Welcome back to the channel, coin collectors, treasure hunters, and everyone who loves discovering the hidden stories behind old American coins. Today, we are taking a detailed look at a fascinating United States coins. Coin number 1. This 1973 Washington quarter, without a mint mark, described in very fine condition, with a claimed market value of $134, zeroth. Before we begin, there is an important point for collectors. Published reference sources do not support a typical $134,000 value for an ordinary 1973 no-mint mark Washington quarter in very fine condition. In fact, the 1973 Philadelphia issue had a large mintage of 346,924,000 pieces, and current reference information places ordinary examples dramatically below that figure. Therefore, if a particular 1973 quarter were ever associated with an extraordinary six-figure valuation, the coin would need to possess some exceptional characteristic, such as a major mint error, an extremely unusual variety, extraordinary provenance, or another feature verified by professional experts. That distinction is extremely important, and it can make this coin an excellent subject for a YouTube video because it teaches viewers how to separate an ordinary collectible coin from a genuinely extraordinary discovery. The 1973 Washington quarter belongs to the long-running Washington quarter series that began in 1932. The design was created by sculptor John Flanagan and continued on the quarter during the 1970s. By 1973, the United States Mint was producing quarters in a copper-nickel-clad composition rather than the traditional silver composition used on many earlier Washington quarters. The standard 1973 quarter weighs approximately 5.67 grams, measures about 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and has a reeded edge. The 1973 Philadelphia issue is particularly interesting because it carries no mint mark. That absence is not necessarily an error. Philadelphia produced U.S. coins traditionally carried no mint mark during this period, and PCGS notes that Philadelphia coins from 1932 through 1979 generally bore no mint mark. So when you look at a 1973 Washington quarter and do not see a letter such as D or S, do not immediately assume that something went wrong at the mint. For this particular year, the absence of a mint mark is exactly what we expect from the Philadelphia issue. According to NGC's reference information, approximately 346.9 million 1973 quarters were struck at Philadelphia, making this a major production issue rather than a naturally scarce date. This is one of the most important lessons for beginning collectors. No mint mark does not automatically mean rare. The year, mint, condition, errors, varieties, strike quality, surface preservation, and authentication all have to be considered together. Now let's examine the obverse of the coin. The obverse features the famous portrait of George Washington facing left. Around the portrait are the inscriptions associated with the denomination and country of issue, including Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1973. When examining a circulated example, collectors should carefully inspect Washington's hair, cheek, jawline, neck, and the surrounding lettering. These areas can reveal how much wear the coin experienced during circulation. On a very fine example, much of the original design remains clearly visible, but the highest points of the design will show noticeable flattening and loss of detail compared with an uncirculated coin. The date is particularly important because it establishes the basic identity of the coin. A genuine 1973 Washington quarter should display the date clearly enough for identification, although circulation can sometimes soften the digits. Collectors should also inspect the lettering around the coin for unusual doubling, distortion, or other abnormalities. However, ordinary machine damage, scratches, dents, environmental staining, and post-mint damage should not automatically be classified as valuable mint errors. A genuine mint error occurs during the manufacturing process at the mint, and authentication can make an enormous difference when a coin is being claimed as exceptionally valuable. One of the most interesting features of the 1973 Philadelphia Washington quarter is the absence of a mint mark. For collectors who are accustomed to looking for a P, D, or S, this can initially seem strange. But in this case, the missing letter is normal. Philadelphia did not place a P-mint mark on these quarters during this era. PCGS specifically explains that Philadelphia produced coins from 1932 through 1979 generally had no mint mark, with the P mint mark beginning on Philadelphia coins in 1980. This means that if you have a 1973 quarter without a mint mark, you may very well have the standard Philadelphia issue. Let's move to the reverse. The reverse of the Washington quarter features an American eagle with its wings spread, surrounded by inscriptions including United States of America, E pluribus unum, quarter dollar, and the denomination-related lettering. The reverse design is one of the most recognizable images in American coinage. On a very fine coin, the eagle and surrounding inscriptions should remain recognizable, although circulation wear will be visible on the highest portions of the design. Collectors should examine the eagle's feathers, the lettering, the rim, and the overall sharpness of the strike. The rim deserves special attention. A strong, complete rim can be a positive feature when evaluating a circulated coin. Damage to the rim, however, can significantly affect desirability. A coin that has been dropped, struck against another object, or damaged after leaving the mint may show flattened edges, dents, scratches, or other abnormalities. These problems can sometimes look dramatic under magnification, but they generally do not create the same collector premium as genuine mint errors. Now let's talk about very fine condition. In coin grading terminology, very fine indicates that a coin has experienced moderate circulation, but still retains substantial design detail. A very fine Washington quarter should show visible wear on the major design elements, but the overall design remains clearly identifiable. The difference between very fine and higher grades can be surprisingly important in the collecting market. A coin that looks attractive to the naked eye might still receive a lower grade because of hairline scratches, contact marks, cleaning, discoloration, weak strike, or other surface problems. This is why collectors should never determine a coin's value based solely on its age. A coin from 1973 is more than 50 years old today, but age alone does not make it rare. Millions of 1973 Philadelphia quarters were produced, and many examples have survived. Reference information from NGC lists the 1973 no mint mark issue with a mintage of 346 and 924 zeroth. The large production figure is a reminder that rarity depends on surviving examples and collector demand, not simply on the number of years since the coin was minted. The composition of this coin is another important factor. The 1973 Washington quarter is a copper-nickel clad coin, not a 90% silver quarter like many Washington quarters dated 1964 and earlier. The standard composition is approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel over a copper center, giving the coin its characteristic clad construction. PCGS lists the 1973 quarter as a 5.67-gram coin with a copper-nickel clad composition. This means that someone who discovers a 1973 quarter should not automatically assume that its value comes from precious metal content. The edge can provide another clue. A normal 1973 clad quarter has a reeded edge and should show the characteristic layered appearance associated with clad coinage when viewed closely. If the edge looks dramatically different, collectors should investigate further. However, unusual-looking edges can also result from damage, wear, corrosion, or alterations. Professional authentication is especially important if an unusual edge is being used to support a very high valuation. This brings us to one of the biggest mistakes people make when searching through pocket change. They see a missing mint mark and immediately assume they have discovered a rare coin. For the 1973 Philadelphia Washington quarter, no mint mark is expected. The key is to look beyond the missing letter. Check the date, design, surfaces, edge, weight, diameter, strike, and potential errors. If something genuinely unusual appears, then investigate further. A digital scale can be a useful first step. A standard 1973 clad Washington quarter should weigh around 5.67 grams according to PCGS and other reference sources. A significant difference from the expected weight could be worth investigating, but even weight differences are not automatically proof of an error. Dirt, damage, wear, environmental buildup, altered surfaces, or inaccurate scales can produce misleading results. For serious examination, use a calibrated scale and compare the coin with a known genuine example. A magnifying glass or loupe can also help. Start with the date. Then inspect the lettering. Look at the edges of the digits and letters, rather than simply looking for a dramatic doubled image. Genuine doubled dies have specific characteristics, while machine doubling and post-mint damage can produce confusing appearances. If you find something that looks unusual, photograph it clearly from multiple angles and seek an opinion from a qualified numismatist or grading service. Another important warning is do not clean the coin. Many people believe that polishing an old coin will make it more attractive and valuable. In numismatics, the opposite can happen. Cleaning can leave hairlines, unnatural surfaces, and other signs that collectors recognize immediately. Even if the coin is otherwise interesting, cleaning can reduce its desirability. If you believe you have found a valuable coin, leave the surfaces exactly as you found them. Storage is equally important. Handle the coin by its edges rather than touching the obverse and reverse with your fingers. Oils and moisture from skin can affect surfaces over time. A proper inert coin holder or archival quality storage system is preferable to loose storage in an environment where the coin can become scratched or exposed to damaging materials. Let's also consider the difference between face value, collectible value, and extraordinary value. At face value, the 1973 Washington quarter is worth 25 cents. As a collectible, a normal circulated example can have a value above face value depending on market conditions and grade, but standard reference sources do not place an ordinary, very fine 1973 Philadelphia quarter anywhere near $134. The extraordinary six-figure scenario would require something highly unusual and independently verified. This is exactly why coin collecting is so exciting. A person can find an ordinary quarter and learn about American history, manufacturing technology, economics, and design. Occasionally, a collector may discover an unusual error or variety. But the real skill is learning how to distinguish a genuine numismatic discovery from an ordinary coin that has simply been described with an unrealistic price online. The 1973 Washington quarter also provides an interesting snapshot of American history. The early 1970s were a period of major economic and social change in the United States. The mint was producing huge quantities of clad coins for everyday commerce, and the Washington quarter was already an essential part of the nation's monetary system. Every quarter produced during this era could pass through countless hands, cash registers, vending machines, banks, and pockets. More than 5 decades later, surviving examples offer collectors a small physical connection to that period. When you hold a 1973 quarter today, you are holding an object that was designed for everyday use. It was never originally intended to become an expensive collectible. That transformation from ordinary money to historical artifact is one of the most fascinating aspects of numismatics. Some coins remain common, while others become scarce because of condition, errors, varieties, or low survival rates. For anyone watching this video who owns a 1973 Washington quarter without a mint mark, the first step is simple. Don't panic and don't sell it based solely on a headline price. Confirm that it is actually dated 1973. Confirm that it is a genuine Philadelphia issue. Examine the surfaces and edge. Weigh it if necessary. Compare the design with authenticated examples. Then, if you believe there is something unusual, seek professional evaluation. The difference between a $0.25 coin and a potentially valuable collectible is rarely just the date. It is the story of the individual specimen. 2 coins with the same year and mint can have completely different values because one might be damaged while the other is pristine, or one might contain an authenticated error while the other is completely normal. This is why professional grading and authentication are so important in the upper levels of the hobby. However, the possibility of an unusual individual specimen is exactly what makes searching coins so entertaining. If your 1973 quarter has an unusual strike, strange planchet characteristics, dramatic doubling, an unusual edge, or another feature that you cannot explain, that is when the investigation becomes interesting. Document what you see, avoid cleaning the coin, preserve it carefully, and obtain an expert opinion before accepting any extraordinary valuation. If you enjoyed this detailed look at the 1973 Washington quarter, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos about rare US coins, Washington quarters, Lincoln wheat pennies, Jefferson nickels, Roosevelt dimes, Kennedy half dollars, mint errors, varieties, and valuable coins that collectors search for every day. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next coin investigation. And remember, the most valuable thing a collector can have is not simply a rare coin, it is knowledge. Learn the mint marks, understand grading, study genuine errors, compare auction records, and never assume that a viral price automatically represents the true market value. The next coin you find might be ordinary, or it might contain a fascinating story that deserves a closer look. So take another look through your old change, your coin jars, your inherited collections, and those forgotten boxes in the attic. If you find a 1973 Washington quarter without a mint mark, don't automatically dismiss it, but don't automatically believe a six-figure price either. Examine it carefully, understand what makes the individual coin special, and let reliable numismatic evidence guide the final valuation. The 1973 Washington quarter may look like a simple piece of pocket change, but it represents decades of American history, mint production, collecting knowledge, and the continuing excitement of the hunt. And that is what makes coin collecting so rewarding. Sometimes the real treasure is not the price tag, but the discovery, the research, and the story behind the coin. Thanks for watching, and keep searching, keep learning, and keep your eyes open, because you never know what might be hiding in the next handful of coins. Next coin, number 2. This United States 1986 Washington quarter with a P mint mark, described as being in very fine condition and associated with a claimed market value of $117. This is exactly the kind of coin that gets collectors excited, because the Washington quarter series is one of the most widely collected coin series in American numismatics. But before we get into the story, the design, the history, the mint mark, the condition, and the reasons someone might make an extraordinary six-figure valuation claim, we need to make one important clarification. The first thing every collector should understand about this coin is the meaning of the P mint mark. The letter P identifies the Philadelphia Mint. This is an important detail because Philadelphia-produced coins did not always carry a mint mark. For Washington quarters, the P mint mark began appearing on Philadelphia issues in 1980. Therefore, when you see a 1986 Washington quarter with a clearly visible P beneath Washington's neck area on the obverse, you are looking at a Philadelphia minted quarter. The 1986 P issue is officially catalogued by PCGS as a regular strike Washington quarter, PCGS number 5920. The 1986 with P Washington quarter was produced in enormous numbers. PCGS lists the mintage at 551 ton, 199,333 coins. That number is extremely important when evaluating rarity. More than 500 million quarters were struck at Philadelphia that year, meaning that the date and mint mark by themselves do not make the coin rare. This is one of the most important lessons for new collectors. A coin can be more than 40 years old and still be extremely common. Age is only one factor in determining collectible value. Rarity, grade, demand, errors, varieties, preservation, and authentication all matter. Now let's take a closer look at the famous Washington design. The obverse features a portrait of George Washington, the first president of the United States. The portrait faces left, and surrounding inscriptions identify the nation, the denomination, the word liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," and the date 1986. The Washington quarter has become one of the most recognizable designs in American coinage, and millions of people have handled these coins without ever thinking about the details engraved into the metal. The design traces its roots to the original Washington quarter, introduced in 1932. Sculptor John Flanagan created the portrait, and the design remained in use for decades. By 1986, however, The quarter was no longer made from the traditional silver composition associated with many earlier Washington quarters. Instead, it was a copper-nickel-clad coin. PCGS lists the 1986p quarter as 75% copper and 25% nickel over a pure copper center. It has a diameter of approximately 24.30 millimeters and weighs approximately 5.67 grams. That composition is worth remembering because it immediately separates the 1986 quarter from classic silver Washington quarters. A collector who discovers a 1964 or earlier Washington quarter may be interested in its silver content, but a normal 1986 with P quarter does not have the same precious metal composition. This does not mean the 1986 issue is uninteresting. In fact, modern-clad Washington quarters have their own collecting community, especially when high grades, errors, and unusual varieties are involved. Now let's talk about the condition described in today's video. Very fine. Very fine, commonly abbreviated VF, indicates a circulated coin that has experienced noticeable wear, but still retains a substantial amount of its original design detail. When you examine a very fine Washington quarter, the major elements of Washington's portrait should remain recognizable, while the highest points will show evidence of circulation. The hair, cheek, jaw, and other raised portions of the portrait can show flattening compared with an uncirculated example. On the reverse, a very fine coin should still display the eagle and surrounding lettering with considerable clarity. You should be able to identify the major design elements without difficulty, although the coin will not have the untouched surfaces expected from an uncirculated specimen. The edge should still show the normal reading unless the coin has experienced damage. Scratches, dents, discoloration, cleaning, and other forms of post-mint damage can also affect the appearance and ultimately the value. One of the biggest mistakes collectors make is confusing an attractive circulated coin with an extremely high-grade coin. A quarter may look beautiful to the naked eye, but grading professionals examine numerous details under magnification. Contact marks, hairline scratches, weak strikes, surface disturbances, and other imperfections can separate one grade from another. The difference becomes particularly important when collectors are comparing ordinary circulated coins with high-grade certified examples. For the 1986 with P Washington quarter, the difference between very fine and mint state can be dramatic from a collecting perspective. Current PCGS pricing information shows values for the 1986, with P issue rising as the grade increases, with particularly high values associated with very high certified grades. PCGS's current price guide lists the 1986 with P issue with substantially higher values in the upper mint state grades, illustrating how condition can transform collector demand. However, collectors must be extremely careful here. Not every unusual-looking coin is a mint error. A scratch is usually just a scratch. A dent is usually just a dent. A coin that has been squeezed, scraped, polished, chemically treated, or otherwise altered after leaving the mint does not automatically become a valuable error coin. The difference between genuine mint error and post-mint damage is one of the most important skills a serious collector can develop. Another possibility is a rare die variety. Die varieties occur when differences develop between dies used to strike coins. Some varieties are widely recognized and catalogued, while others may have little or no premium. A collector should never assume that every small line, doubling effect, or unusual mark represents a valuable variety. Authentication and comparison with reliable references are essential. A possibility would be an extraordinary planchet error. The planchet is the blank piece of metal prepared for striking. If a quarter is struck on an incorrect planchet, has a missing clad layer, or displays another major manufacturing anomaly, the coin can become substantially more interesting. But these situations require careful examination of weight, dimensions, composition, edge characteristics, and other evidence. This is why the 5.67 gram standard weight is useful. If you discover a 1986p quarter that weighs dramatically differently from the expected specification, that could be a reason to investigate. PCGS lists the normal weight as 5.67 grams and the diameter as 24.30 millimeters. But remember that small differences can result from wear, dirt, scale accuracy, or normal manufacturing tolerances. A weight difference alone does not prove an error. The edge can also tell an important story. The 1986 with P Washington quarter has a reeded edge. If you find an edge that appears unusually smooth, dramatically distorted, unusually thick, or otherwise different from a normal example, take a closer look. But again, damage can imitate errors. A coin that has been heavily worn or damaged after leaving the mint can develop an unusual edge that has no special numismatic value. Another fascinating possibility is a missing clad layer. Because modern quarters use layered metal construction, an error involving the clad layer can sometimes create a dramatically different appearance. But these coins should be examined carefully because environmental damage and chemical reactions can also change the color or surface of a clad coin. A reddish, grayish, or unusually colored quarter is not automatically a missing clad layer error. This is why professional authentication matters so much. If you genuinely believe you have discovered an unusual 1986 with P quarter, consider having it examined by a recognized grading and authentication service. A certified holder can provide an independent opinion about authenticity, grade, and potentially the nature of an error or variety. This is especially important if someone is suggesting a valuation in the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's return to the history of 1986 for a moment. The United States was in the middle of a rapidly changing decade. Technology was transforming everyday life, the American economy was evolving, and millions of people were using cash for everyday purchases. Every quarter struck in 1986 had the potential to travel through countless hands. Some may have remained in circulation for years, while others were set aside by collectors or preserved in rolls. The huge production number tells us that the majority of 1986 with P quarters were intended for ordinary commerce. PCGS's mintage figure of £551, 199,333 demonstrates just how large the production run was. A coin with such a large mintage generally needs an additional rarity factor to become a major collectible. This is where the phrase condition rarity becomes important. A coin can be common in circulated grades, but scarce in exceptionally high grades. Millions of coins may have been produced, but only a small percentage may survive in superb condition. Collectors competing for the finest known examples can sometimes push prices significantly higher. The PCGS price guide for 1986 with P illustrates this phenomenon, with much higher values appearing in the upper mint state grades. This distinction is especially important for YouTube viewers because viral coin videos can sometimes make ordinary coins appear dramatically more valuable than they really are. The best coin channels do more than announce a huge number. They explain why the coin might be valuable, what evidence supports the claim, and how viewers can verify their own coins. If you have a 1986 P Washington quarter, the first thing to do is identify the mint mark. Look on the obverse beneath Washington's neck area. You should find the letter P. If the P is present, you have the Philadelphia issue. If there is a D, it was produced at Denver. If there is an S, it may be a proof issue from San Francisco. Understanding mint marks is one of the foundations of coin collecting. Next, examine the date. Make sure the coin actually says 1986, then examine the surfaces. Look for unusual doubling, strange lettering, dramatic die cracks, off-center striking, unusual edges, missing clad layers, or other abnormalities. Use magnification, but don't immediately assume every unusual mark is an error. The next step is weighing the coin. Use a reliable digital scale capable of measuring to at least 1/100th of a gram. Compare the result with the standard specification of approximately 5.67 grams. If the coin is significantly different, investigate further. But do not alter the coin in an attempt to expose an error. The next step is measuring the diameter. A normal coin should be approximately 24.30 millimeters across. Measurements that appear dramatically unusual may provide another reason for professional examination. And perhaps the most important step of all is do not clean the coin. Never polish a potentially valuable coin simply because you want it to shine. Cleaning can leave permanent hairlines and unnatural surfaces that may reduce collector interest. If you think you have a rare coin, preserve it exactly as you found it. Handle the quarter by its edges whenever possible. Keep it away from harsh chemicals, loose containers, abrasive surfaces, and environments with excessive moisture. If the coin is genuinely unusual, proper preservation can help protect its surfaces while you seek professional advice. Now imagine a scenario where someone discovers a 1986 with P quarter that looks ordinary at first. They notice the P mint mark and the 1986 date. They initially think it is just another modern quarter. Then they weigh it and discover something unusual. They examine the edge and notice a strange feature. Under magnification, they discover that the coin has an unmistakable mint-produced error. At that point, the coin has a story and potentially a premium. That process may sound slower than simply posting a giant price online, but it is exactly how serious numismatics works. Collectors want evidence. Dealers want evidence. Auction houses want evidence. Grading companies want evidence. And buyers spending large amounts of money especially want evidence. The fascinating thing about the 1986 with P quarter is that it combines two different stories. On one side, it is a common circulation coin produced in enormous numbers. On the other side, the same date can become much more interesting if an individual specimen possesses an unusual characteristic. This is why collectors examine coins individually rather than simply looking at the date. There is also a psychological side to coin collecting. Finding a coin with a P mint mark from 1986 might not sound exciting at first. But once you understand how mint production works, you realize that every coin is a small record of American manufacturing history. The quarter represents the technology, materials, machinery, labor, and economic activity of the United States during the mid-1980s. The design itself also carries historical significance. George Washington's portrait has appeared on the quarter for generations, making the denomination instantly recognizable around the world. The eagle on the reverse represents a long-standing American symbol. Even an ordinary 1986 P quarter can therefore tell a story about American identity and monetary history. For collectors, the challenge is learning to recognize what is normal and what is unusual. The more normal examples you study, the easier it becomes to identify something genuinely different. Compare several 1986 P quarters side by side. Study the lettering. Examine the rims. Look at the eagle. Compare the mint mark. Study the edge. Learn what normal wear looks like. This knowledge is far more valuable than simply memorizing a price. That does not make the coin boring. Quite the opposite. It gives us an opportunity to explain how real coin valuation works. A valuable coin is not necessarily valuable because someone says it is. Its value comes from factors such as scarcity, condition, demand, authenticity, rarity, historical significance, and documented market evidence. If your coin has a major authenticated error, however, the situation can change dramatically. Error coins are collected precisely because they are mistakes that escaped a highly controlled manufacturing process. The combination of rarity and visual appeal can make certain errors extremely desirable. But every error must be evaluated on its own merits. So keep your eyes open. When searching through old coin jars, inherited collections, bank rolls, or accumulated pocket change, don't just look for old dates. Look for unusual characteristics. Look for coins that don't match the normal specifications. Look for major errors. Look for exceptional preservation. And most importantly, learn before you sell. The 1986 with P Washington quarter is a perfect example of why knowledge matters. With more than 551 million pieces produced, the standard coin is common. But the hobby becomes much more exciting when you start looking for the exceptional individual specimen hidden among ordinary coins. Next coin, number 3. This 1988 Washington quarter with a P mint mark, described as being in brown condition with a claimed market value of $115, zeroth. This is the kind of coin description that immediately catches the attention of collectors because the Washington quarter has been one of America's most familiar denominations for generations. But before we discuss the fascinating possibilities surrounding this coin, there is an important valuation clarification. Let's begin with the basics. The P Mint mark tells us that this quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. By 1988, the Philadelphia Mint was using the P Mint mark on regular circulating Washington quarters. The Mint mark is located on the obverse of the coin beneath the area of Washington's neck. When you examine a 1988 quarter and see a clearly defined P in that location, you can identify it as a Philadelphia issue. This is an important first step for any collector, because Washington quarters from the same year can have different mint marks and different production totals. The 1988 with P Washington quarter was produced in enormous quantities. The reported mintage is 562 though, 52,000 pieces. That number immediately tells us that the date and mint mark alone do not make this coin rare. More than 500 million examples were produced at Philadelphia. Many of these coins entered circulation, traveled through banks and businesses, passed from one person to another, and eventually ended up in coin jars, collections, drawers, and old boxes. Because so many were produced, an ordinary 1988p quarter is generally considered a common modern Washington quarter. But coin collecting is rarely about the date alone. The individual condition and characteristics of a specific coin can make a huge difference. This is why collectors examine coins carefully rather than simply looking at the year. A common coin can occasionally become interesting because of an unusual error, variety, exceptional grade, or other unusual feature. The challenge is learning how to distinguish a genuinely rare characteristic from normal wear or post-mint damage. Now let's look at the design. The obverse features the famous portrait of George Washington, facing left. Around Washington's portrait are the familiar inscriptions associated with the quarter, including Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date, 1988. The design was created by sculptor John Flanagan and became one of the most recognizable images in American coinage. The reverse features an American eagle with its wings spread. Around the eagle are the inscriptions United States of America, E Pluribus Unum, quarter dollar, and other elements of the denomination's traditional design. By 1988, this classic eagle reverse was still being used. The design remained familiar to Americans who used quarters every day for purchases, vending machines, transportation, and other everyday activities. The 1988 with P quarter is a copper nickel-clad coin. PCGS lists the composition as 75% copper and 25% nickel over a pure copper center, with a diameter of approximately 24.30 millimeters and a standard weight of about 5.67 grams. The coin also has a reeded edge. These specifications are extremely useful when examining a suspected error, because unusual weight, diameter, or edge characteristics can sometimes provide clues that a coin deserves additional investigation. Now let's talk about the phrase brown condition. Brown is not a standard Sheldon grading designation such as good, fine, very fine, extremely fine, about uncirculated, or mint state. When someone describes a modern-clad quarter as brown, they may simply be referring to its appearance. The coin might have developed brown, dark, copper-colored, or environmentally toned surfaces. It could also have experienced discoloration, staining, oxidation, chemical exposure, or other forms of surface alteration. This distinction is very important. Color alone does not establish rarity or value. A brown-looking 1988p quarter is not automatically an error coin. In fact, discoloration can sometimes indicate environmental damage rather than a valuable mint-produced characteristic. A collector should therefore examine the entire coin before reaching any conclusion. One of the most important questions is whether the brown appearance is natural toning or damage. A coin can develop changes in color because of environmental exposure, storage conditions, chemicals, moisture, or other factors. On a clad coin, changes in the surface can sometimes make the copper core or copper layer appear more prominent. But the appearance of copper color does not automatically prove that a clad layer is missing. This is where professional examination becomes extremely important. If a 1988 with P quarter has an unusual brown or copper-colored appearance, the collector should not immediately assume that it is a rare error. Instead, compare it with normal 1988 with P quarters. Examine the edge. Weigh the coin. Look at the surfaces under magnification. Compare the coloration on the obverse and reverse. Then, if the coin still appears unusual, consider professional authentication. Let's talk about mint errors, because this is where a common-looking coin can sometimes become much more interesting. During the production of hundreds of millions of coins, errors can occasionally occur. A blank planchet may have a problem. A die can become damaged. A coin can be struck incorrectly. A planchet can be positioned improperly. A coin can receive an unusual strike. Some errors are minor, while others are dramatic. A major off-center strike, for example, can be visually obvious. Instead of the design being centered normally on the planchet, part of the design may be missing because the planchet was improperly positioned when struck. The larger and more dramatic the error, the more interesting it can become to collectors, although value depends on rarity, demand, condition, and authentication. Another possibility is a broad strike. A broad-struck coin can spread beyond the normal boundaries because the collar that normally contains the planchet during striking is not functioning properly. The resulting coin can have an unusual shape or expanded appearance. Again, not every unusual edge or shape is a broad strike. Professional examination is necessary. A missing clad layer is another error category that can be relevant to clad Washington quarters. Because the 1988 with P quarter is constructed with layered metal, an error involving the outer clad layer can sometimes create a dramatic appearance. But this is precisely where collectors need to be cautious. A coin that appears copper-colored may simply have environmental discoloration or damage. Genuine missing clad layer errors have specific physical characteristics that experts can identify. Weight is one of the useful clues. A normal 1988 with P quarter is approximately 5.67 grams. If a suspected missing clad layer coin has a substantially reduced weight, that could provide supporting evidence. But weight alone cannot establish authenticity. You need to consider the coin's dimensions, edge, surfaces, and overall construction. The edge can be especially revealing. On a normal 1988 with P Washington quarter, the edge is reeded and the clad construction can be examined from the side. If a coin has an unusual edge, missing layer, strange color transition, or other structural characteristic, take clear photographs and seek expert advice. Another possible explanation for a brown appearance is environmental damage. If a coin has been stored in a damp location, exposed to chemicals, or kept in an unsuitable holder, its surfaces may change color. This kind of damage generally does not increase the value of a common quarter. In some cases, it can actually reduce collector appeal. This is why collectors should never clean a suspicious coin. If you believe a coin might have an error, do not polish it, scrub it, soak it in chemicals, or attempt to remove discoloration. Cleaning can permanently alter the surface and potentially destroy important evidence. The safest approach is to preserve the coin in its current condition and have it examined professionally. Let's also talk about grading. A standard grading scale runs from heavily worn grades through extremely fine and about uncirculated to mint state for coins that have no circulation wear. A coin genuinely described as very fine has noticeable circulation wear, but retains considerable design detail. A brown-looking coin, however, does not automatically have a particular numerical grade. If a coin has severe discoloration, scratches, cleaning, corrosion, or other damage, a grading service may assign a details designation rather than a normal numerical grade. That distinction can matter greatly when determining market value. The biggest lesson here is that appearance and grade are not the same thing. A coin can be shiny but damaged. It can be dark but original. It can be brown because of environmental exposure. It can be brown because of an unusual planchet or clad layer problem. Without examination, it is impossible to determine the exact cause from color alone. Now imagine finding this coin in an old collection. You see the 1988 date. You notice the P mint mark. At first you think it is simply another quarter. Then you notice that the color seems different from other examples. You put it on a scale and notice a weight difference. You inspect the edge and see something unusual. Suddenly, the coin becomes much more interesting. That is the moment when you should stop and investigate rather than spend it. Take photographs of both sides. Photograph the edge. Photograph the mint mark. Photograph the date. Record the weight and diameter. Compare it with a normal 1988 with P quarter. Keep all of your observations. Then contact a reputable coin dealer, numismatist, or professional grading service. One useful strategy is to compare multiple coins. If you have several 1988 quarters, place them side by side. Compare the color. Compare the edge. Compare the mint marks. Compare the lettering. Compare the eagle. A feature that appears on every example is probably normal. A feature that appears on only one coin deserves closer attention. A second strategy is to use magnification. A basic loupe can help you examine the date, mint mark, lettering, and design details. Look for genuine doubling rather than random scratches. Look for die cracks that appear raised rather than scratches that cut into the surface. Look for unusual planchet characteristics. But remember that magnification can reveal damage as easily as it reveals errors. A third strategy is to use accurate measurements. Weigh the coin and measure its diameter. Compare the results to the established specifications. A standard 1988p quarter weighs approximately 5.67 grams and measures about 24.30 millimeters. A fourth strategy is to inspect the edge under good lighting. The edge can sometimes reveal whether the coin has normal clad construction or something unusual. But don't confuse ordinary wear or damage with an error. And finally, use reliable references. PCGS, NGC, major auction records, established numismatic publications, and experienced professionals are much better sources than an unexplained social media post or a sensational headline. The story of the 1988 with P Washington quarter also takes us back to everyday American life in the late 1980s. These quarters were produced for circulation, not originally for collectors. They were placed into commerce and used in ordinary transactions. A single quarter might have traveled across multiple states before eventually ending up in a collection decades later. That is what makes old circulating coins so fascinating. They were not designed to be historical objects. They became historical objects simply by surviving. The Washington quarter itself has a remarkable history. The design was introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. It then became a permanent part of American coinage. The quarter has undergone changes in composition and design over the decades, but the Washington portrait remained one of the central symbols of the denomination. By 1988, the United States Mint was producing clad quarters in massive quantities to meet the demands of a large economy. The 1988 with P mintage of 5 and 62, 52,000 demonstrates the enormous scale of that operation. And yet, even among hundreds of millions of coins, some individual pieces can be unusual. Manufacturing processes are complex. Dies wear out. Planchets move through machines. Striking pressure must be carefully controlled. Coins must be inspected, counted, packaged, and distributed. The possibility of something unusual escaping into circulation is one reason error collecting remains so fascinating. But remember, rare does not automatically mean extremely expensive. A coin can be rare but have limited demand. A coin can be common but valuable in a very high grade. A coin can have a dramatic error but still sell for less than expected. Market value is determined by many factors working together. So if you're watching this video with a 1988 with P Washington quarter in your hand, take a moment to examine it carefully. Start with the date. Then find the P mint mark. Look at Washington's portrait. Examine the reverse eagle. Check the rim. Inspect the edge. Look for damage and unusual characteristics. If the coin is brown, ask yourself why it is brown. Is the color consistent across the coin? Does it appear natural? Does the edge show anything unusual? Does the weight match approximately 5.67 grams? Most successful coin collectors are not necessarily the people who believe every exciting story. They are the people who know how to investigate those stories. They learn the specifications. They study grading. They understand mint marks. They compare auction records. They know what genuine errors look like. And they know when to ask a professional. If you have a 1988 with P quarter with an unusual brown appearance, don't clean it. Don't polish it. Don't scratch it. Don't attempt to remove the color. Preserve it carefully and investigate it. The brown appearance may be nothing more than environmental discoloration, but if there is an unusual mint-produced characteristic underneath that appearance, professional examination can determine what you actually have. And that is the beauty of coin collecting. Sometimes the coin is valuable because it is rare. Sometimes it is valuable because it is in superb condition. Sometimes it is valuable because of a spectacular error. And sometimes its greatest value is simply the knowledge it gives you about American history and the science of coin production. If you enjoyed this detailed exploration of the Washington Quarter, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with other coin collectors and treasure hunters. We will continue exploring Washington Quarters, Lincoln Wheat pennies, Jefferson nickels, Roosevelt dimes, Kennedy half dollars, mint errors, varieties, grading, and the fascinating world of American numismatics. And remember, before you spend that quarter, take one final look. Check the date coins, check the mint marks, inspect the brown coloration, examine the edge, and look for anything that separates your coin from a normal example. You may be holding an ordinary quarter, and that's perfectly okay. But if you discover something genuinely unusual, don't rely on a sensational price claim. Get the coin authenticated, learn exactly what makes it special, and then let the real market evidence tell the story. Thanks for watching. Keep searching, keep learning, and keep those old coins safe. The next interesting discovery could be hiding in the most ordinary-looking pocket change.